Let's talk about setting the direction, setting the azimuth. How do you tell people what to do? And I'm not talking about, Howard, pick up the chair and move it to the back of the room. That's not what I'm talking about. How do you tell your organization what you want to get accomplished? Call them in, send them an email, what? It's a simple question that, very frankly, most people can't answer because they never thought about it. They never think about what they do on a day-to-day basis. So let me see if I can, that's a military term that comes from the Civil War. The military started thinking about how you transmit orders back in the 1800s. Because again, this was an organization, American military, European militaries, where the literacy rate was very low. The officers were the educated class, and so they had what they call an orders group, where Lee would get his generals, Longstreet, et cetera, group them together and say, this is what I want to talk about, this is what we're going to do, and then it would get transmitted verbally down to different size organizations. So the first part of this thinking about, and I'm using this to kind of ask you to think about how you do this, is what's the situation? Now, this is designed to say to any organization, what is going on? And invariably, what you're asking the organization, the person who's transmitting this thing is, tell the people who are going to do the executing of this thing what's going on 2 levels above them and on their adjacent flanks. 2 levels above them, what's going on their right and left. What are you doing? You're communicating to the people who are going to do something so they have what I call a situational awareness. If I only tell you to go from A to B without telling you what's on your right, what's on your left, what higher organization is doing, you're operating in a vacuum. You're losing the opportunity for discretionary performance. But if I tell you what's going on, then you say, okay, I understand what the battlefield looks like. Because battle space is like space in the business world. If you don't understand it, you're going to make mistakes, not because of commission, but mostly because of omission. So you tell them what's going on. What are you trying to do? Here is a very interesting kind of thing that we learn the hard way. Giving somebody a mission, go from A to B with 5,000 Marines, take that hill and hold it. What we found out was this was okay during World War II, Korea, and the front end of the Vietnam War. At the end of the Vietnam War, when we shifted into a all-volunteer force, one of the things we discovered is the legacy of the previous 50 years describing missions, because by the time of the Vietnam War, we were getting a lot of political input into operational issues, that people could not articulate what the mission was. And so what we tried to do is create a course out in 29 Palms at the National Training Center, and I was fortunate enough to be part of that process, where we taught people how to give orders. That might sound very simple. And what we actually did was we recorded everything on tape. So if you were a battalion or regimental commander, we'd give you a mission, you'd think about it, you'd say, okay, we're going to do A, B, and C. So that person was required to tell his battalion commanders or artillery supporting arms and airplanes what their mission was. We recorded it. And then we'd go execute it on a computer simulation. And about 60% of the time it failed. The execution failed. We'd get everybody in the room and say, okay, and we'd go all the way down to the kind of the squad leader level. Ask the squad leader, who was the point squad leader, the reconnaissance platoon sergeant, whatever it is, what did you think the mission was? And the colonel, general, was in the room. Now, it took a little getting used to, but sergeants are sergeants, so they'd stand up and say, I was told to go to Hill 421 and hold it. And the general would say, that's not what I told you to do. And so we'd turn the tape recorder on, play what the colonel said, and invariably what the corporal sergeant heard was what he did. So what happens in this business of telling people what to do becomes incredibly important. What's missing, what we found out after a period of about a year, what was missing was in order to. We are doing this in order to do X, in order to achieve Y. This becomes as important because the people who are doing it, if the situation on the ground changes, which it invariably does, they understand what you're trying to accomplish and they will invariably figure out an alternative way to do it and get it done. We went through this whole process and one of the big problems we had was asking a commander, these are usually 1-star, 2-star generals, what do you need to know for you to meet your mission requirements? And invariably, they said everything. They did not know how to manage the information input. In today's world, there isn't anything on the face of the earth that you can't research, as long as you have the time. However, when you're in an environment where you have to make decisions, you have to figure out what you want the system to tell you. What key critical information requirements do you need to know? This is also, when I talk to large organizations like Shell and other people, my answer, my discussion with them invariably is, look, you as Shell, Chevron, whoever it is, you measure everything and know nothing at the senior levels. About 80% of the information that's coming in to a senior manager, senior leader, is absolutely irrelevant to what he does on a day-to-day basis. 80% of it. What does that person act on? A phone call, a text message, or what it is that that person thinks is important. So what that says to me is that there's a whole group of people out there on staffs who are doing work that's absolutely irrelevant to the organization. It's called institutional repertoire. And that's why I say you have to understand whether you're a leader or a manager. Because if you allow your staff to manage your inbox or manage your schedule or your life, you will get it wrong. Decide what you need to know, get the information, and disregard everything else. Now, that's easy to say, but trust me, it works. I used to walk around and say to somebody, they'd say, hey, Jack, we need to get this report in by noontime. I'd look at it and I'd say, who's asking for this? They'd say, well, corporate HR. My answer was, don't send it. And they'd say, well, they're going to call me up and yell at me. I'd say, good, give them my phone number. Tell them to call me up. Nobody ever called. We reduced our administrative overhead by not doing stupid things. I even did this to the Senate once when I was the director for operations. I stopped sending reports over to the Senate. Nobody called. Nobody knew that they were going over there. I had 3 people on my staff who did nothing but reports. I put them to work doing something else. Okay, execution. How are you going to do this? So what you actually are doing is talking to the people out conceptually, how are you going to do it? Now, do you tell them how to do this? This gets the difference between direction and azimuth. Or do you ask the person who's executing it, what's the recommended way that he or she wants to do this? This becomes your plan. Now, you got to own this. Once you have this discussion, this is your plan. You can't say, Howard made me do this. Oh, no. Now, this is about you as an individual. How are you going to do it? Do you tell us how you want to do it, or do you ask the people how you do it? So you're getting instant feedback and input to what, because in my previous life, people's lives are at risk. And I'd at least want to give them a chance to vote how they want to die. In your organization, maybe you want to vote on how you're going to execute something if it's put your business out of commission. Administration, this is classic kind of beans, bullets, and band-aids. Where's the aid station going to be? In your case, in my case in Bechtel, who is supporting whom? The administration of all large-size projects is consumed with reporting. Now, some of this you can't control because the client wants things in certain formats and all that kind of stuff. In some cases, you can beat that down to a manageable number. But inside your organization, the administration of a project is who in the staff is asking for information and why. If they are not value added, don't do it. This gets to the business of execution, of who's doing it. 2/3 of the available resources go to the person. So what you're interested can do is you say, okay, fine, HR, you want these reports on a day-to-day basis, send your person to Kazakhstan and have them sit on the project. All of a sudden the requirement goes away. When we ran the onshore processing facility in Sakhalin, I only sent in one report a month. And that was our progress report. Everything else we just stopped doing because my rule was, fine, you want a report, I'll do it, but you have to come out here and get it. To get to Sakhalin, you got to fly to Moscow, then you take an overnight plane on Trans-Zero, which is 14 and a half hours, then you land to Yuzhno, and you take a train up, overnight train. And it's usually about 25 or 30 below zero. Trust me, nobody wants to come visit you. Command and control, this is where your influence on a mission becomes critically important. If you are an azimuth person, you are denying the person who's doing the work the opportunity to be creative. Now, obviously, you have a financial and a reporting responsibility to talk to your project managers and all that kind of stuff. But if you are constantly putting him or her in a position where it's a mother may I, you've neutered that person. Because what you want to do is empower the person who's at the point of the spear to make decisions that influences the outcome of what that person is responsible for. You don't want to be there. Because invariably what happens is if there's a manager sitting in this position, the person at the other end gets blamed. Senior manager comes down and says, what the hell's going on in Dabul power plants? Why is it 2 months behind schedule? And if all you're doing is doing reports and you don't know, you haven't walked it, the easiest outcome is to say, the project manager hasn't told me we've got this problem. Now, these are kind of things that we created, situation, mission, execution, administration, command and control, where it's essentially the elements of what you should be telling somebody who's going to go execute a major project or something significant. That is a real significant event in the life of your company. Think through how you communicate and what you communicate. Because the nonverbal communications you give to a project manager become incredibly important. If you're not supportive, if you haven't given that person the resources, the time, and your personal attention, then there's increased probability that that project will fail. You have to own it. You have to own the people. They're your children. I don't know of anybody that comes to work in the morning who's a communist and says, I'm going to screw this up.